Schwarzenegger.
Well, thank you very much, Lenny, for your wonderful introduction and for making me feel so young. Appreciate it. But just remember one thing, every time those movies run, I get residuals, okay? So no matter how old I am, I feel good about when they run. Also, thank you very much, Jim, Wonderman. I call him Wundermann because that's really the right German pronunciation. And then Sean Randolph, thank you very much for being here. Then the Bay Area Council of Economic Institute, thank you all for hosting this. And Mayor Rob Schroeder, where's Mayor Rob Schroeder? Is he here? Got stuck? Okay, got stuck. All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure I don't miss him. And all the business leaders, I want to thank you all for being here today. And I'm always after the state of the state, or when we do our budget presentation, I go up and down the state and talk a little bit about, what we talked about during that state of the state and budget presentation, but also to explain more into details and also give you the opportunity to ask questions. Because I think that in the end, when I think about the partners that I've had and the things that we're able to accomplish in this last few years since I've been in office was largely because of the people of California being my partners. And it's all of you. I mean, you made this possible. I mean, we have 120 legislators. They make some of the things possible, but in the end, it's always the people getting involved and their voice being heard in Sacramento that really make things happen. And this is why I feel always very much interested in going out and talking to the people directly rather than just sitting around in my office and making things happen there. Because even though the people in Sacramento always think that Sacramento is California, but the fact really is that it's all those counties, those 58 counties in the cities together. That's what makes California. And Sacramento is only a little dot on a map. Even though they hate to hear that in Sacramento when you tell them that, but that's the way I feel about it. The action is out there all over California, and that's why I like to travel up and down. Now, one of the things that I want to mention is, even though we have a bump in the road with our economy and with our budget, but the fact of the matter is I think great things were done in these last few years because of everyone working together. I mean, if you think about what I've inherited in 2003, when we had the recall election, it was a disaster. The state of California, I mean, businesses were moving away. Workers' compensation was the poison of the economy. We rang up the biggest deficit in the history, and the debt was getting bigger and bigger. So, I mean, everywhere you looked, unemployment rate, Democrats and Republicans couldn't get along no matter what the subject matter was. It's just the state just didn't move forward. It moved backwards. And since then, we brought the economy back. And one of the most important things, even though at that time everyone was screaming loud that we have to raise taxes, we have a shortage of revenues, I said, no, I don't see any problem with the revenues because the revenues are always going up consistently. They just, go up like this, but they go up. I said, so there's not a revenue problem. I think Sacramento has a spending problem, and they've been overspending for too long, and they don't have really a good budget system. So we did the opposite of raising taxes. We reformed workers' compensation, which lowered the rates of the workers' comp costs by 63% by now. That's an equivalent of putting back altogether over these years now approximately $24 billion back into the economy. So that's a huge amount of money. Rather than taking money from the people and from businesses, we give money back to the private sector. The other thing we have done was we rescinded, the first hour I was in office, I rescinded the car tax, which is approximately between $4 to $6 billion a year. Now, just to think about that over the last 4 years, that's an equivalent of approximately $20 billion. So you now take those $20 billion and you add it to the other $24 billion. That's $44 billion went this way rather than us collecting, because I'm a big believer that the people know better what to do with that money than Sacramento knows. We just spend it. So therefore, it was much better to give it back to the people. So that's where I stand when it comes to taxes. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that it was very important because that is what really stimulated also the economy. As America was going back economically, an upswing, we really pushed hard by putting money back into the economy It created over 1 million new jobs in California since I've come into office. Even though you see today the unemployment rate being at 6.1%, that's just really, but we are still creating jobs. So it doesn't mean like, we have gone down. We're going up in job creation, but it's just more people now because of the economic situation are looking for jobs, and that's what changes that number. But we have again last month created 18,000 new jobs. So each month we're creating more jobs, and like I said, over 1 million jobs were created since I've come into office. And our revenues have increased from $76 billion in 2003-2004 to $96 billion now. So this is an average of $5 billion increase a year. The interesting thing is that we now, even though with this economic turnaround and everything is going well in California, we have been hit by the housing crisis and by the subprime mortgage crisis. That has had a spillover effect. But again, we are very lucky, very resilient economy in California. And so instead of having revenue increase of 6%, we now have a revenue increase of 1%. So again, we are not going down with our revenues. This is the important thing. We are going up, but just not as much as we anticipated. Now that means that our revenues are flat, but our spending formulas make our spending go up by 7.3%. Now you all are in business, and you know what happens when your spending goes up by 7.3%, but your revenues are only 1% increase. What happens is what you see right here. As you can see, the last 10 years, the green represents the revenues, and the yellow represents the spending. Look at how those two lines are out of whack. They have no relationship with each other at all. Now, when I came into office here, we tried to bring those two lines together, and there was, of course, like I said, economic growth. But now the economy is leveling off, and the revenues are leveling off, but the spending continues increasing, just as if we have the biggest economic boom. Not even if we have the big economic boom, we will be able to continue handling that kind of an increase in spending. Now, again, Sacramento is talking about we got to go and compromise here. We got to raise taxes. So I say, why would we need to raise taxes? All we have to do is fix the budget system. The budget system is wrong because the spending and the revenues have no relationship with each other. If we would have, for the last 10 years, had a system in place that we are recommending and the kind of reforms that we are recommending, the two lines would have been much more together. Not perfectly together. We are not saying that creates perfection, but it's just more perfect than it is today. Today it's totally out of sync. And those two lines will be together. And as you can see again, here is the year 1999, and here we are in 2007-8. So that means there's a continuous increase in revenues, and therefore we can have a continuous increase in spending, but not like this. When you have a system in place the way we have it right now, we have 1 year, we have the revenues shoot up, we spend all of the money. You can't hold it back. I've tried very hard by using a lot of that one-time revenue spikes for one-time expenditure, which means to pay off debt that was created by the previous administration, paying back transportation where they borrowed and stole from transportation when they had a financial trouble in the past. We could give back money to local government. We gave money everywhere there was money to be given back to. And we paid off our recovery bond money early. We prepaid a lot of that money. So that's how we took money away from these spikes. But still, the rest of it was grabbed and spent. They love to do that in Sacramento. The problem is that when you then have a leveling off, you don't have now money, a rainy day fund, to supplement the decrease of what you anticipated. So this is why now this year we have to cut 10% across the board. That's a recommendation that I have made. Maybe the legislators find a better way of dealing with the crisis and with the problem that we have. But I found that the fairest way is to make 10% across the cut, because this way you don't pick and choose winners and losers. Because otherwise people will go into this thing and saying, well, I think prisons are more important than education, or healthcare is more important than this, some programs for the elderly. So what I said was, let's just cut across the board. Now, like I said, the legislators are my partners in this. They will be coming in and saying, well, we have some recommendations, we have to make some changes. It's perfectly fine with me because, like I said, I will be inclusive and I will be, letting them be my partners in all of this, and we will be negotiating on this. But we have to make the cuts. One thing we know for sure, that we have right now, this represents what you see here, is a $14.5 billion deficit. That's what this represents. Now, if we don't have a system in place very soon and don't have reforms, what we will have is this situation right over here. As you can see, they continue going further and further apart, those two lines, the revenues versus spending. And each year, it represents approximately $10 to $12 billion deficit. This is why I say you can't tax your way out of this problem. It's a systemic problem. You would have to go to the people every year and ask them for $10 to $12 billion more. Now, I don't think that it's fair to the people of California to go to them and to say, we need your money, when in fact, we don't need their money. In fact, all we have to do is fix the budget system. So this is why I think it is important to show you that if we fix this year our budget system, those two lines will come together according to the way we are proposing it. And what we are proposing is basically very simple. And that is that let's put a rainy day fund aside. Meaning that if we have a spike in revenues, let's take some of that money and put it aside so when our revenues flatten out that we can supplement those revenues. And number two, let's predetermine of which programs we cut in case we have to make cuts. And the reason why that is important is because the way it's right now, the legislators will be sitting down and will be negotiating and negotiating and negotiating. And while the budget negotiations go on, nothing else will get done. That I can guarantee. I've seen it year after year now. I've seen it for 4 years. Nothing else gets done in Sacramento. When they debate from May 14th, when I hand in my budget revise, to the time the budget is done. Now, may I remind you that the budget is supposed to be done on June 15th. That never happens. Now it goes on casually through July 1st, through July 15th, many times through July 30th, then into August, and sometimes even to September. Now think about all of this month. Nothing gets done during this month other than the budget. So people say, why can't you just each time negotiate the budget? I say, because it takes 3 months out and nothing else gets done. Why don't we sit down once and for all and pre-decide? Let's determine now what programs will be cut if we are out of whack by $3 billion during the year. All of a sudden you see the revenues are not coming in. Something triggers it. After $2 billion, it triggers it. And all of a sudden it makes the cuts. Without having to sit down now for 3 months and make that decision, because that's what we have to do right now. And then if it goes further down, we have another layer of cuts, programs that you have laid out. They say, we make cuts here. And then if it goes further down, here's another row of programs that we need to cut. So that's kind of what Arkansas has done successfully for 60 years. They never have a fight there. No arguments, because it's pre-decided. I cannot right now cut, even though for months and months and months in California we have been spending now $400 to $600 million a month more than we are taking in. I, as governor, cannot stop that. I have no power. The governor in California has the least amount of power when it comes to mid-year cuts. But if you talk about that you want to have the power to have mid-year cuts, they scream power grab. So that's why it's a very sensitive issue. That's why I say, I don't need to have the power. It makes no difference to me, but let's make the decision now. What is it going to be? What do we cut? So that as soon as we see 2 or 3 months in a row that we're not getting the revenues that we anticipated, let's stop the big spending. That is what we want to do. Otherwise, we do have to go back to the people always and say, we need your tax dollars. We need to increase taxes. In fact, as you can see, the line always goes up. So there's not a revenue problem. We have increase in revenues. We have a systemic problem. That's what the problem really is. So we need to fix that. And as soon as we fix that, then we can go and move forward and create confidence again, because people lose confidence when they see this kind of craziness. And so I have tried twice since I'm coming to office. Now, previous governors have tried. Jerry Brown has tried to change the system. Pete Wilson has tried to change the system, the budget system. And no one was ever successful, because there's a lot of special interests and powerful interests out there that try to derail you when you try to change the budget system, because they benefit from this. But in the end, they really don't benefit. That's the interesting thing. No one benefits. Even though education, for instance, is protected under Proposition 98. But in fact, they're not, because we can suspend Proposition 98. And it is a terrible thing to do, because we're taking our children on a roller coaster ride. We're taking all the people, the vulnerable citizens, on a roller coaster ride, ups and down, up and down. I think that they deserve much better. What they deserve is a continuous increase in revenues where there's never a suspension, where we never have to make cuts at all, because there's no reason for us ever to make cuts, because we've always increased in revenues. All we have to do is, when we have a spike, have rainy day funds put aside, so when it flattens out the revenues, we can supplement those revenues. End of story. I mean, it's very simple, but it's very tough to do in Sacramento, because they just love to spend. Love to spend. Love to promise to the people of California things that they can't keep. And they know ahead of time they can't keep it. So that's what we have to change. That's the culture we have to change. It's a very challenging thing. Sounds little, but it's a very challenging thing to do. So anyway, I just wanted you to know what the situation is and what the complexity is. So there's three things I just want to tell you that they have to do. One is they have to go and look at the mid-year cuts, which is, I declare the fiscal emergency. So they have 45 days, the legislators, to go and make the changes and make those mid-year cuts, which is approximately $800 million we recommend on mid-year cuts. And then the second thing they have to do is fix the next year's budget right now. Why do they need to fix the budget right now? Is because it takes months and months and months to take an effect on mid-year cuts. You can't, for instance, if I say we want to cut in prisons by 10%, you can't cut from one day to the next or from 1 month to the next, because that means that you have to lay off prison guards. Now, you can't lay off any prison guards. It takes you 9 months to lay off prison guards. So just to show you how difficult it is. The same is with law enforcement. If you want to make cuts, we have already paid for the whole fiscal year to law enforcement. That's already gone, money gone. In healthcare, we pay cash. It's very difficult to stop. You can't just stop and tell patients, your service is over from one day to the next. There's federal laws that come into play on this whole thing. So this is why we need to do next year's budget as soon as possible, because it takes months to make those cuts. So it's, again, very important. So this is number 2. Number 3, then we have to fix the budget system. So those are the 3 stages of things that we need to do. Now, I want to open it up. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to ask. And is Mike Ginest here? Oh, no, you are here for Mike Ginest. Oh, man. Am I happy in case there's some detailed questions and on taxes or on anything like that, you can immediately jump in. Okay, any questions about any of this? Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
One of the things in business is no matter how efficient we think our operations are, it's the mantra of business to be looking for continuous improvement in the way we operate. And one of the issues we have in the state is there's really been no sustained effort on the part of California, not to be critical of the state, but to find the way to say, okay, this is the amount of services that we provide, and this is how much money we think we have, and maybe we think we could provide more and better services within the same parameter. I mean, that's what we do in the business world. Is there any interest, obviously in the administration, you've shown some interest in this area, but is there any potential that that could be part of the future equation so that we could actually get more out of the existing resources that we have?
I think, Jim, first of all, let me just tell you that whenever you have a crisis, in a way it's not a crisis, but in a way it is. I mean, I call it a crisis because it's a problem that comes up all the time, And it really, is a problem not only for the people that are being sent on a roller coaster ride, but it's also a problem for the financial community. Wall Street that looks at us. They always will look at us as a state that is a powerful state, the most powerful state in the nation, and one of the most incredible economies in the world. But they also look at us as, in a way, shaky, because we are not fiscally responsible. And so that's why our credit rating has never been the best. As a matter of fact, we had the worst credit rating in California when I took over. I mean, worse than some African nations. And sadly to say, now we have improved the credit rating several times since I've come into office. But when they see that, they must be saying to themselves, wait a minute, they still don't have their act together. They've done a great job these last few years, but they're still not there where we want them to be. And so what I'm trying to do is get us there where we need to be to really show to the rest of the world stability in that area also. Because the reality is the whole world wants to do business with us again. It's unbelievable the kind of activities with trade and with all of these things. Now the president, as you know, on Wednesday is coming and to put this new trade proposal forward, which I think will be great because it's all in California. Our strength comes a lot from trade, and I'm a big believer in that. So there's all kinds of great activities going on, but we got to straighten this out. And I think because we have this bump in the road, people are going to look at all kinds of things where we can improve. Like just the other day, you should know that one of the most important things is when you have a bump in the road like this is not to lose your sight on the big picture. The big picture is that we must rebuild California. The last year with the strategic growth plan where people voted, in 2006, I should say, they voted for rebuilding California, the $37 billion infrastructure bonds, plus the $5 billion in water bonds. We got to continue building California because for 4 decades, California didn't get the infrastructure that we needed. So when I came into office, I looked at our plan and I said, if we haven't spent any money on infrastructure, in the meantime, the population is growing and growing and growing. We have infrastructure now for water and transportation and schools and universities for 20 million people, but not for 37 million. Now, the sad story is that you actually have to say not for 45 million, because the fact is if we start building anything today, it would take 10 years to finish. Any of the big highway projects or water projects would take 15 to 20 years. If we build new dams and a new delivery system, water delivery system, it would take 15 to 20 years. So we have to actually think about building for 45 and 50 million people. So this just shows you how far we are behind. And that's why California made a big step forward to make the commitment to go and rebuild California and to approve those infrastructure bonds. And this is why it is important for us to keep the eye on the ball and not to say, why should we build this when we have a financial problem right now? Why should we redo healthcare? And why should we do healthcare reform when we have this financial problem right now? That's why I used Roosevelt in my State of the State, because I said, even during the Depression, which was the worst time America ever went through, he went aggressively forward and he built 680,000 miles of roads and 125,000 government buildings and 76,000 bridges. And he went on and on and on and built, which stimulated the economy and put everyone to work. So that's what we have to do, not because we have a bump in the road to say, let's freeze now and let's stop everything. No, that would be the wrong thing to do. And so I think that we see now everyone looking at, are we really building fast enough? Because our program to spend the $37 billion is over a period of 10 years. So now they're saying, wait a minute, we actually could create more jobs while we have a problem in the housing market and we're losing jobs in the housing market. Let's go and take all of these people and put them into public projects. And let us speed up the projects and build more freeways and tunnels and bridges and off-ramps and on-ramps and all of those things quicker. Instead of 10 years, let's do it in 6 years. And we have the approval already, we have the money, all we have to do is just appropriate that money for the projects. So that's, all of this dialogue is going on right now in Sacramento, and it's wonderful to see everyone now saying, let's get creative. And so I think a lot of this action will be taking place, good, positive things. Yeah.
Dr. Schwarzenegger and Gary Lyon, City Council in Your 10% across-the-board cuts, how might that impact How might 10% across the board impact revenues to local governments?
Well, we are not going to take, first of all, through Proposition 1A. As you know, local governments are protected. So that means that we are not going to steal any money from you ever again.
Thank you.
Exactly. Because, as you know, in the past, that's what they did. When Sacramento ran out of money, they went and stole money from local government. It was staggering. And they grabbed money from transportation and from the pension funds and from everywhere. But now, through Proposition 42, we can't steal any more from transportation. Because of Proposition 1A, we can't steal any more money from local government. And because of Proposition 58, we cannot borrow for ongoing programs. So we tightened the noose. We tightened the noose because I knew that eventually this problem is going to come again. That's why I tried to reform our budget system in the past. When I came in first into office, I tried to reform it, and the legislators voted it down. Then I went to the people through the special election, and again, it was not approved. So now we try it a third time, and I'm going to keep trying and trying and trying until we get it reformed. But so we are not going to take any money from local government.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Thank you so much for all that you've done, and really appreciate the big picture. And certainly every crisis, as the other side, is opportunity. And one of the big areas that we're concerned about at the North Bay Leadership Council is our economic competitiveness. And we see California and the United States slipping for several reasons which we're concerned about. And one is education. We think that's a linchpin issue, and we would really like to see a lot more focus on education, not just in the funding side, but getting us to be looking at different ways that we can recapture being the innovation capital of the world, and looking at money for research and development, maybe putting an innovation czar in the state cabinet. And love to hear what you think and what we need to do, because we want to keep that revenue flowing and growing, and we think there's things that have to be done, and we're concerned maybe with these 10% cuts across the board that might really hurt our ability to be competitive.
Well, first of all, you're absolutely correct. I mean, education has always been my concern, and this is why I said that for us to take these kids on this roller coaster ride is not fair, even though we think they're protected through Prop 98, but they're really not. And so I think that we should have a budget system where we can continuously increase the funding for education. And I've been a big believer not only in education when it comes to kindergarten through 12th, but for after-school programs, preschool programs, career-tech educational facilities, and also classes, and also community colleges, and our university system itself. And I'm very pleased to say that in the last few years, since 2003, we have seen an increase in the amount of courses in math and science courses that our students have taken, and by 53%. And also we are now trying to get more teachers to come in because we need in the next 10 years 100,000 more teachers to come in to our school system, because a lot of them are retiring. So this is all of this we have to focus on, and especially in our community colleges and our universities to expand those facilities in career-tech education and so on. But we have to be competitive. You're absolutely correct. That's why it is very important that we change the system and we bring a good system, a budget system in, so we don't have to go this up and down kind of a ride. Okay? Thank you. Yes, any other question? Please, yes.
Get creative. Could you say something about your proposals to bring more private finance to the table through public-private partnerships?
Well, as you know, during my State of the State address, I talked at great length about the public-private partnerships, because we need in California, because we have fallen behind so much. I consider the $37 billion plus the $5 billion in water bonds really the foot in the door. But it's not solving really all the problems. What we really need on infrastructure now is to catch up is $500 billion on infrastructure over the next 20 years. Now, the public side does not have that kind of money. So therefore, it is important for us to think about passing laws and changing the rules so that we can have public-private partnerships in this state. Because the private sector, there's a lot of money out there. And the private sector wants to come in and build the roads and build the buildings for the government and build some of those things that we need. And we've seen great public-private partnerships, for instance, in British Columbia, When I was up there, we have seen them make huge investments in building all kinds of great things there, and everyone is happy. You know, the labor is happy, the business leaders are happy, politicians are happy, the people are happy, and the future is happy because of it. So I think there's all kinds of great things we can do, and I think there's a great opportunity there. Yes, please.
Folks here can do to help in the last minute here to try to get the votes in the Senate, and then if it's not successful, is there any way that we can at least make some progress this year, for example, ensuring children, or some progress on health care reform?
Well, you know, I never think of it being over until it's over. So I'm still today optimistic that the Senate is going to do the right thing and is not going to look at a temporary budget problem as the reason to not vote for our health care reform. I think it is extremely important that the Senate votes yes on the budget reform, on the health care reform, because it is just too many people uninsured. We have 6.7 million people uninsured. We have hospitals that are closing emergency rooms because, they can't afford it anymore. The hospitals that get stuck with unpaid bills, with billions of dollars of unpaid bills. We have you all that are insured paying a hidden tax of 20% because you have to cover those that are uninsured. We see that people have to live in fear continuously. Those that are insured, that the insurance policy gets canceled when they get sick, because that's what they do a lot of times. And those that don't have insurance have to live in fear that you have literally one long hospital stay away from a person having to file for personal bankruptcy. So those are the kind of things, and we see healthcare costs going up at double-digit numbers, which is also unfair. So it's chaos in our healthcare system. And this is why we have sat down for a year, negotiated, and brought all the stakeholders together in order to bring a system in there that will improve all of this tremendously. Now, is it perfect? I don't think we will ever get a perfect system. There is none in the world. But we have come to as close as possible to that, and I think that's why it is very important that the Senate should approve this health care reform once and for all, and we appreciate all the hard work that they're putting in. Yes.
Yes, Governor. First, I wanted to thank you for going up and down the state and talking to ordinary citizens about the budget, and I appreciate the enormous challenge that you have. With respect to one of the proposals in the budget, there is a request, I guess, for 07-08 monies to be delayed that's paid to local government, especially to counties. Since most people really relate to government based on what the services are to them locally, could you please talk a little bit about what that impact will be with the delay on local government, and as I see it, especially hospitals, social services, the frail and the elderly will be affected, and the matching dollars from the federal government will be delayed because local government, like Alameda County, gets 50% of their revenue from state and federal government.
First of all, we are working.
I'm on the board of supervisors, Alameda County, but I'm also on the Bay Area Economic Institute.
Well, as you know, we are working right now with local government leaders in order to make sure that it will not have any effect on the services that you provide. And the reason why we have to have the delay for a few months only is because of the cash flow. Because we have a problem with cash flow. Comes June or July this year, cash will be out. And so this is why we have this delay with the payments. But we're not going to take anything away from local government at all. This just will be a delay. Okay? Because we want you to continue your services. And that's why we passed Proposition 1A in the first place, to make sure that local government has the money, because that's where the action is. Thank you for asking. Anyway, one more question, and I get the signal that we have to wrap it up. Yes, please.
Governor, back on the subject of infrastructure and reducing the overall size of government, some entities, such as the British government and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, are seeking to deliver more infrastructure with fewer people by changing their role. The British government actually privatized what they call the Public Service Administration 14 years ago. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is now converting themselves from an engineering organization to a management organization where they facilitate the projects, and they can do that, get more work out with fewer staff. Is the state at all looking at reducing the size of government and getting more projects out and measures like that?
Well, that's why I said earlier, I think because of the situation that we are in, everyone is getting much more creative and trying to figure out how do we go, first of all, and change the regulations, because we over-regulated. And this is why we have a problem that when you have the approval of $37 billion of infrastructure bonds by the people and by the legislators, that doesn't mean yet the money is being spent, that it's still hanging there. Now, luckily, $8 billion of that money has already been appropriated faster than ever in the history of California. So government is getting much more into the action rather than just waiting. So now the trick is how do we make sure that the rest of the $29 billion gets appropriated as quickly as possible. And we are looking at stripping away and changing some of the regulations and laws, because there's a lot of regulations that now both parties are recognizing. Too many regulations are there in order to appropriate that money and to really put people to work. So this is why we had a meeting last week about that with Democratic leaders and Republicans, and you will see some quick changes there. As a matter of fact, don't be surprised that in the next month you will see some big announcements of changes that will happen so that we can appropriate the money quick and we can put people to work much quicker and make government much more efficient. So thank you very much. Okay, so again, I want to say thank you very much to all of you for listening. We really appreciate it. I'm going to, like I said, go up and down the state to do that and to be out there with the people. And your support is very important. The more you call the Senate today, because today there will be most likely a vote, the more you get involved. If you want to have health care reform, this is our chance. And then, of course, it will go on a ballot. And then we all have to work together to make sure it passes there. But this is the day, one of the most important days when it comes to health care reform. So again, thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back. Thank you.